Welcome back to our techno-communist conversation. I thank you again for joining me, and I look forward to our future discussions. If you want to comment here or at a later time, um, please feel free and I will respond. Um, I was just looking at another conversation with relating to the Gaza genocide. Yesterday was the biggest civilian loss of life in Gaza since the war began. But what are the Western Zionist, fascist friendly media outlets focusing on at this time? Not that loss of life of civilians, adding to the massive death toll of over 30,000 in 110 days, including 13,000 children at least. That's not even including all those who are lost and presumed dead, or badly injured, maimed, scarred for life. Massive horror that's been unleashed. But no, they're not focused on that. These settler colonial fascist organs, media mouthpieces, are focused on loss of life of settler colonial fascist enemy combatants, 21 so-called Israeli soldiers killed yesterday. And that's gotten a huge number of lines above the fold, much larger than what you would see in these kinds of media outlets talking about the actual Holocaust occurring in Gaza. It's not occurring; it's being perpetrated by the Zionist fascist entity known as Israel, and it's a horror, and unspeakable, a horror, and it's the reason that the United States funds the settler colonial fascist project of Israel. And if you talk to a lot of people, they'll tend to want to place the blame on Israel, but that's confusing the operations of empire. The United States has a lot of ways in which it confuses its militaristic fascism in the minds of people, and one is to have proxies like those in the Ukraine, who will tend to be taking credits or taking blame, as the case may be, for actions that are planned and funded by the fascist United States. So these outliers of the imperial core are not responsible to the degree that we attribute responsibility to them, relative to the mastermind of all of this, the fascist USA. And it bears repeating because, as terrible as the policy decisions of the Israeli government, particularly Netanyahu regime, are, none of this would be happening without the fascist USA pulling the strings. And the people who say this, that the Israelis control the U.S., there's a kernel of truth to it. Of course, IPAC should be done away with. All of this sort of thing should be done away with. But if you really look at the receipts, if you really look at the accounting, there's no funding mechanism by which Israel funds the U.S. military-industrial complex. To suggest such a thing would be just patently absurd. But there is a very real funding mechanism by which the Israel, as the fascist state, apartheid state, genocidal state that you see in your feeds today, would not exist without a constant funding and providing of other operational necessaries and the reason that they have this shared goal is because um, the desire is to whitewash and legitimize the settler colonial project, the white supremacist fascist project itself. This is why um, in 1948 the fascist West did not push to say have a Jewish state expanded upon the Jewish state that already existed before the fascist state of Israel was created. That in the Jewish autonomous oblast of the USSR, which admittedly did not have a lot of people living in it, nor did it have a lot of um, real enthusiasm from the Jewish community after the time of its development, but it could have um, if had people not succumbed to the more militaristic and and fascistic impulses that drove uh, the Europeans who were responsible for the Holocaust of Jewish people, rather, pardon me, um, uh, to then further that horror by orchestrating the establishment of a Jewish state in the Middle East, displacing people, and of course, what you know is the Nakba, um, displacing and murdering people in great number. But the number of people displaced in the last 110 days is much larger. The number of people killed is larger. And you wouldn't know about any of this if it were not for the existence of social media, and particularly networks of activists on social media, because social media itself suffers from the same problems as mainstream media. It's been captured by fascists, as exemplified by the purchase of Twitter.com by infamous and odious fascist Elon Musk, paying approximately 3 times over its value for this purchase, just so that things like this could be done, so that some influence over this rogue media outlet could wrongly be pursued, so that it would be more like these mainstream media outlets that only really tell you kernels of the truth and filter all of this through fascistic propaganda. And it's saddening and maddening. It should make you feel that, but let me encourage you to instead of being driven to despair by such things, to let them radicalize you, to let them fill you with revolutionary spirit, and not only the desire to see justice done in our time, but the will to work with others to build such a thing. This is the bare minimum that we must pursue if our species is to survive, because we are just about 5 years away from a permanent breach of a 2-degree overheating of this planet. This is not speculation. This is a factual understanding of all climate scientists, and so we need to utterly destroy the systems that have not been able to reform and will never be able to reform, or bring capitalist super pollution to heal. We must instead take it upon ourselves to do this basic act of self-defense in the dismantling of empire and capital. Empire is central to that because the United States military-industrial complex is the world's worst polluter, because its only real job doesn't help you. Its only real job, the United States government, is to protect other super polluters on pain of great violence to be done against anyone who defies that system. This is the original sin of the U.S. and the U.K. in the Middle East, overthrowing uh, the elected um, uh, uh, more more social democratic leader Mossadegh um, in Iran and imposing and putting in its place the Shah of Iran. Um, uh, this was all done to protect, mostly done to protect particular kind of capital, oil, but British Petroleum, and this is the United States stepping out of its role in doing this sort of thing more in its so-called backyard, and this was then something that became increasingly commonplace across the course of the 20th century in other ways as well. Um, and this it's um, there's we're close to this breaking point, and we have to be willing to do what's necessary to save the species. It's as simple as that. I made a mistake of uh, uh, talking about some of these things to my therapist, who I then started to realize is not someone that I can really trust. And I knew that, of course. I had limited my conversations to matters less focused on world affairs. um, but I made the mistake of letting a person who was an associate of this therapist, who had expressed an interest in my writing in another area to do with e-learning project, and expressed an interest in my work, and so I was foolish enough to let them see that there's this other work that I'd become more focused on, which I think is more um, a bit more relevant form of education for our world than the kind of things that I'd done professionally before. Um, I wish that the rest of the world would see it that way, and I wish that it could be um, um, something more than this fringe kind of activity. And I hope that in time that it will. But this is something that now these people becoming aware of this writing and this pamphlet that I wrote, How to Use AI to Build Communism in Your Lifetime, because if we don't, humans will soon become extinct. Apparently my therapist, she didn't mention that, but it seems that they may have compared notes because this other individual, her associate, had seen that. And so these are people who have virtually no political consciousness, no interest in, say, stopping capitalism's climate apocalypse. People who, because of this lack of understanding of the world around them and the situation that they're in, will instead do violence to a lot of people, not just myself, on behalf of this ecocidal establishment. I'll take the side of the Earth killers. And if you press people like this, why are you taking the side of the Earth killers when we only have 5 years to change the system before we're all locked into our extinction? When you press them, they'll say something like what Elon Musk would say in that situation. Oh, there's electric cars, and there's options. We have options. Those options are not being exercised. It's a veritable cottage industry for the last 20 years um, articles where you say, "Oh, this look at what this is, how this sector could be transformed." But then the reality under this hyper-capitalist hell, neoliberal mandates protected by the imperial fascism of the U.S. The reality is that unless it's something that expands the petroleum sectors or doesn't threaten those kinds of sectors, it will not be implemented. So you read about something like, oh, this is what will replace single-use plastics, for example, something that's made of another material that's completely biodegradable. It doesn't get implemented. And you list hundreds of things like this. It's not being implemented. So the lie of liberals and capitalists is that something will be done in time, but it's not being done. And this is a similar lie that told by technologists about artificial intelligence. It was in the news just this week um, um, that Sam Altman of OpenAI, the team behind ChatGPT, said that because of the environmental impact of this emerging sector of machine learning, which is massive, that we will not be able to really have this sector unless we develop a new kind of energy technologies. And again, those are things that have also been developed in laboratories, but um, but not rolled out because we've just allowed the existing private wealth, the existing fascistic institutions, to have run of the whole, to have the run of everything, and to continue to pollute, to continue to suppress alternatives, and this is the way that things are under capitalism. It's why capitalism must be done away with, and you shouldn't listen to people like um, my therapist or this other associate of theirs under any circumstance. You shouldn't trust people like this. They are people on the wrong side of history. They are people who, this field of psychiatry, broadly speaking, it largely serves that function of sustaining, maintaining the status quo um, to, to varying degrees. Different countries have different kinds of capitalist status quo across the West. But whatever the ruling elite uh, dictates happen to be in that place, people like this will be upholding them, and they will not be thought of kindly in time for having done this. But today, they're regarded as among the most legitimate and respectable sorts of folks. And so let's talk again about what should occur in time, what must occur in time, in the form of the United Earth Directorate, and that's a phrase that I've come up with to describe these ideas in this techno-communist conversation. But it may well take other forms. It may absolutely would probably take other forms, other names. But I hope that maybe this illustration of the United Earth Directorate can give you some inspiration there. I'm reminded of how in 1917 the USSR, the first socialist country, the Soviet experiment, as it's known, which is an apt an apt description in this context because if you look at the writings of Vladimir Lenin just a year or two before, he is not uh, anticipating that a Soviet state will be established in his country. He's not anticipating this happening in his lifetime. He's thinking more in terms of the world revolution and the raising of consciousness, the world around, and this then leading to the establishment of socialist states. And the um, Similarly, something like the United Earth Directorate may not um, that kind of governance structure that's described in these shows, and I'll describe in this show, but you can look at other videos. Um, it might occur less in this envisioned world revolution context, and more in the socialism in one country context, as occurred in a number of countries in the course of the 20th century, most notably the USSR and China. Today, still reflected in the constitutions of any number of countries, or a certain number of countries: China, Laos, Vietnam, Cuba, the uh, uh, the Korea, the real Korea, DPRK, KR, and uh, so this is all, I think, is an inevitability, but the purpose of making it an exigency in our time is because of this ticking clock of 5 years before we have reached this point of no return of a climate death spiral, and that point of no return, when reached, might not kill all of humanity. It might merely kill a few billion of us. Um, but those few billion will be people in the global south, predominantly. And so that is effectively then a genocide committed by the global north through its indulgence in consumerist industrial technologies against the global south, who have made virtually no contribution to that environmental impact, but nevertheless will be the ones to die. Continuing in neo-colonial form, the colonial violence of decades and centuries past. So let's turn now to the conversation of techno-communism, because we do stand at a crossroads looking at this global crisis. Capitalism's climate apocalypse casts a dark shadow over our planet. So I hope to be an agent for change in this, and maybe inspire you to be an agent for change in this. If I can even speak to a few people on this subject, then I'm happy. But I'd like to be doing more. We have to confront this greatest of existential risks of our time with collective action, with activism of various kinds. The stronger the better. Direct action around the world, resisting these elitist, unsustainable, and cruel institutions. And further, we have to radically reimagine institutions for our future. I think if you're watching this show, you maybe already know that direct action and organizing is necessary. So that's why I've taken to talking about the United Earth Directorate, because it's not enough perhaps to only say what you don't like in this world. It might also be helpful to be able to describe some of the things that you do want to see happen. Let's turn our analysis to a few different works. I mentioned in the longer pamphlet that I mentioned how to build communism in your lifetime, because if we don't, our species will soon become extinct. I mentioned in that longer pamphlet the works of J. Posadas, and I'm going to reference them a little bit now. J. Posadas wrote a book um, that um, refers to basically the first contact described in the Star Trek universe. Flying Saucers is the beginning of that work. The first few words of that work is a long title. And so in this Flying Saucers a book, he imagines socio-political impacts and new institutions pushing toward fully realized communism as a result of this theorized contact um, with extraterrestrials, not unlike the impact that Vulcans, fictional characters, had on the people of Earth in the Star Trek universe. But these ideas are more relevant. This kind of impact is more relevant, I think, now than in the 20th century, but not in the context of contact with extraterrestrials, which remains a highly speculative, if not utterly fanciful notion, but in the context of our interaction with a similar kind of entity, artificial intelligence, with some basic agency or autonomy, and possessing human level intelligence. Not merely a realistic prospect in the next few years, but a near certainty even in 2 to 3 years' time. I'd also going to refer to the study and conversation about the operation of the Politburo, as it was known, this work that examines the functioning of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union and the Bolshevik institutions. And so by looking again at these, at the possibility of an AI-run governance structure through these unique perspectives, I think we can get some further insights into how advanced computing can impact human society, sociopolitics, and economic affairs, which, there's nothing really in human affairs of more significance than economic affairs. Liberals overwhelmingly want to downplay this, but they're more or less the same discipline. And my therapist, for example, takes pretty active disinterest in trying to honestly understand human society, and downplays the role of material conditions and economic affairs in this. It's a terrible, terrible mistake, and it reflects not merely an entitlement, but very, very poorly concealed cruelty toward the masses and working people. As we embark on a journey toward our proposed United Earth Directorate, guided by these ideas of techno-communism, which is essentially no different from the main line of Marxist-Leninist Maoist thought, but emphasizing the most powerful tool that has ever existed. At the point of artificial intelligence is not really that a thing be artificially intelligent. It's not really for you to have a cool buddy or a mechanical Turk or a sideshow parlor trick to amuse you. The point is that dramatically advanced computing frameworks can be used to build new and important things and better your life. And there's never been a more powerful tool in all of history than this emerging advanced computing that we call artificial intelligence in the early 21st century. And so we must be honest about the problems that we face and this larger landscape and see what these assets and resources are and what they could become, and understand what these liabilities are, and understand what then is the responsibility of you and I, the masses, working people, those representing the working class, in all of this. And so the revolutionary genius of Comrade Lenin and the man who followed him, Comrade Stalin, and who fought beside him, should be should guide us at every turn, I think. These are people who did right by working people, as well as they could, in the face of tremendous violence, backlash on the part of the ruling elites. There was this a Soviet state emerged from, to some degree, from the chaos of the First World War, and when that war ended, the forces of the ruling elites regrouped and drove the Soviet Union into a civil war, trying to bring back the czarist power and bring back monarchism and bring back what that represented, which is really um, a world that is a country that would have been more friendly to capitalist forces and private wealth and the manipulation and extraction of resources and cruelty that all of that represents. Um, but I don't think that you can mention these people without, of course, representing a person of similar importance. These are among the most important humans ever to walk the earth, and that is Chairman Mao Zedong. Of all the books that you can read and reread, I recommend rereading his regularly, such as the combat liberalism writings on that is on fighting against the rot of liberalist thinking in the collective, and his many other works that offer insights into the building and maintaining of a humane and sustainable economic system. These, like Lenin's and Stalin's works, can be reread with great frequency and new insights derived. It was only in relatively recent years that I really took the tack of reading these things, truly reading and rereading them and immersing in this study. And I regret that I hadn't done it before. I regret that I was not a more serious-minded person before a few years ago. So the United Earth Directorate could become a revolutionary force like that which led to the establishment of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union and the state that it represented. We could then liberate humankind by liberating advanced computing from the clutches of the present day US run empire, the military industrial complex, and all that it entails in geopolitics, and from private wealth. The only thing that any of these people care about, they don't care if 100,000 people a year die without a proper health care, or many, many more even die from preventable condition like coronavirus. They don't care about any of that. They only care about consolidating private wealth and maintaining the power and influence that's required to consolidate and protect private wealth, which benefits virtually no one except a very small number of people. And so we have to envision an alternative, and the alternative that I talk about on this show is an AI-driven governance system that focuses on the values of the masses, and not just their values and interests, but incorporating working people's input into the running of this United Earth Directorate through the power of artificial superintelligence. It's foolish that we can imagine something like artificial superintelligence in our time, which would be the artificial and general intelligence of this thing which has a higher degree of autonomy and insight into its behavior and skills approaching that of a human mind or exceeding it in certain ways, already exceeded in certain ways. It's foolish that we can imagine this artificial general intelligence, which operate in conjunction with human effort and human connectivity through other network technologies. All of that in larger operation we can call superintelligence. It's foolish that we can conceive of superintelligence, but we're not really permitted under the regime of of the fascist West and its militaristic propaganda and its capitalistic propaganda. We're not really permitted to imagine that could be used to build better things, even when the lack of this imagination will lead to not only the death of conceivably many billions in the global south, not conceivably, but absolutely, but conceivably all of humankind, including the ruling elites. The ruling elites would rather die than give up power in any way. And we, of course, are all being brainwashed to accept this horror of horrors. So let's consider what then this proposed United Earth Directorate, an AI-run governance structure, how we can create it so that it is aligned with a survivable world, a livable world for human beings, and not just the bare minimum of survivability, but unlocking unprecedented potential for humankind. I've said it before, the famous Stephen Jay Gould quote. He said, "I'm less concerned." He's talking about Einstein. "I'm less concerned with the particulars of Einstein's brain to be dissected than I am with all of the many, many millions of potential Einsteins, all of the genius of humankind that was not allowed to flourish because those geniuses died working in fields and sweatshops. That is the human condition, unmet potential, and something like the United Earth Directorate and something like techno-communism as described would unlock that potential. That is billions of people becoming real forces of nature, becoming people like Comrade Lenin, becoming people perhaps in their scientific output like Albert Einstein, who was also an ardent socialist and wrote a book called Why Socialism, which I highly recommend, probably more as much as almost any short book on the subject. So let's return for a second to Posada's concept of contact with aliens, because it's parallel to the United Earth Directorate's suggested use of superintelligence and artificial intelligence. This possibility of artificial general intelligence in the next year or two. Mark Zuckerberg was in the news this week for saying that Llama 2 is already out. Llama 3 is, according to Facebook, going to be out this quarter, sometime in the spring of 2024 potentially. And he says that Llama 3 is going to possess artificial general intelligence. So this is something that you will be able to download and put on your computer, And according to Mark Zuckerberg, which he may be overstating this to try and insinuating his company more into the conversation and activities around artificial intelligence development. But according to Mark Zuckerberg, this will be something um, that will have that will be artificially generally intelligent, and it is also something that's been developed, unlike most of these other products, under open source specifications. So it would be free for you to download and use, and in that respect, safer for you, in the sense of you being safe from the surveillance state and fascistic institutions of that kind, the way that you are not safe when you're using OpenAI and others like this, or Google, any Google product, for example. All of this, artificial general intelligence, you should think of it, I think, in this context of first contact with an alien intelligence. And I think that it is having that impact and will increasingly have that impact on global consciousness and leading to a shift in class consciousness worldwide. And this will be transforming human affairs in ways that we can't really quite comprehend yet. But we can say that without this shift toward class consciousness, that we will be making the gravest of errors, because we have a limited time to fix certain serious problems, namely capitalism's climate apocalypse, and that requires these most powerful tools that have ever existed, and using them with very specific intention by the masses to stand against these ecocidal ruling elites who will not be stopped without that that level of organizing on the part of working people, and without, in my view, the use of these advanced computing tools to strengthen our insurgency against these fascists. Um, uh, Shifting gears a little bit to thinking about the United Earth Directorate in terms of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. I'll again say something that I said on the other shows, that these things can be used to develop new kinds of products rapidly. In fact, this very conversation um, was inspired by using such tools, namely myreader.ai, which is able to look at an entire book and then answer questions based on its understanding of not just one book but a couple of books. It can look at a couple of books at the same time and have complex conversations about aspects of all of them and respond to prompts. Unfortunately, it's not free. So you can use it to upload 1,000,000 words or number of books, and ask it about 10 questions a day, or ask it 10 questions a day. But it also does generate suggested prompts based on your earlier prompts, so you can sort of have conversations on its own. No real writing except your initial writing. This, to me, suggests the early stages of the use of something like the digital twin, or AI sidekick, without the autonomy or insight into its actions, but nevertheless able to do an awful lot of work product in a very short time. But the people like Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk or the many other, basically every tech person that you've ever heard of will not let you use that. They will not encourage you to use that to better yourself. They'll say that they want you to, but their definition of bettering yourself is operating in some kind of Amazon.com type model where you are forced in the gig economy type situation to become more productive on behalf of billionaires and getting virtually nothing in return. Billionaires earning 300 times, or CEOs rather, earning approximately 300 times that of workers. So it's not just a situation where the boss makes a dollar but you make a dime. It's more of a situation where the boss makes $20 and you make a dime, and that's kind of runaway inequality that's led to lower life expectancy in the United States, lack of basic human rights in the form of social safety net programs and other considerations for workers. The lack of a housing authority has led to homelessness in about 1 million people freezing to death right now across much of the United States. A certain number of them in great danger and discomfort, all of them in great discomfort. This is all owing to the same problems that have led us to the brink of capitalism's climate apocalypse, and it all must be fought against. I mentioned to some degree insights from this into the writings of Lenin and Stalin in this and other conversations about the United Earth Directorate, like vigilance against things like Project Mockingbird, the deception of the ruling elites that insinuates itself into every part of our lives, so much so that it's reality. Capitalist realism is effectively reality for the fascist West, and that essential problem of fascist and capitalist realism is the major reason why we are able to imagine superintelligence, but not really effectively able to imagine or implement it to even save our own lives. So we have to be vigilant against this kind of propagandistic infiltration and elitist infiltration, and we'll have to continue to be vigilant in it when something like the United Earth Directorate is built. It's always kind of a strange sort of paradox for socialists that we would view the fight for a socialist state. People would generally view that as a worthy thing, but protecting the socialist state once it exists from people who would then destroy it is somehow seen as authoritarian. It's not authoritarian. The only authoritarians that have ever existed are the capitalist ruling elites, the fascistic ruling elites, and other relics of times past. So we must see the triumph of techno-communism in our countries and on every continent in short order, and the clock is ticking. We have a limited window before Earth's temperature breaches this critical threshold, leading us into the aforementioned climate change death spiral. So let's shift gears to ideas that have um, uh, kernels of truth in a way that oftentimes fascistic-minded reformers, crypto-fascists, often have kernels of truth. They have a limited hangout tendency where they'll have one thing that they say they want to do that's consistent with that of more serious thinkers. But oftentimes, as was the case with the founder of the United States Transhumanist Party that I had attempted to develop a working relationship with a few years ago, he was an advocate for a basic income scheme. But then, when humanity might have been pushing for a basic income at the beginning of lockdowns and at the beginning of the coronavirus outbreak, he was nowhere to be found. He was no longer talking about um, basic income, even though he'd written many, many essays on basic income in support of it, entire book perhaps on basic income in support of it. When it came to be a realistic possibility, his limited hangout feature, his fascism, was unveiled, and he instead talked about protecting the economy so that private wealth could be consolidated during that time frame as it was. Private wealth was consolidated. Programs of the social safety net variety were further diluted and weakened in that time frame, not strengthened. The few that were, the very few that were rolled out at that time, like rent moratoriums, were a poison pill. My city, for example, has had about 10% of its people just in recent months who were expelled from their homes. This is something that should be illegal, but it's nevertheless commonplace in the United States that renters are thrown out of their homes. They were expelled from their homes because of being in arrears with this poison pill that was rent moratoriums. So it didn't actually help people. They didn't really do anything to help people. They didn't try to stop the coronavirus either. It's killing almost as many people as it ever has right now. And the fact that some of these variants have less virulent symptoms, but people are catching this 2 or 3 times a month, and it's weakening their immune system each time. It's weakening their cardiovascular system each time. It's having effects of brain damage each time. This is unique and different from other colds, so to speak. Getting other colds, catching the coronavirus, this is nothing short of a culling of working people that's more or less been planned by the fascist ruling elites. At this moment, when we are beginning to recognize that we have to take a stand against them, they're weakening us in every way by forcing us into this slaughterhouse that is unchecked disease. There was a movie that was made better part of a century ago called Panic in the Streets. Starred a man named Joseph Cotton. It was set in New Orleans at the outbreak of a plague there. And it basically describes, in this fictional story, development of the modern centers for disease control. So the point is, we've had the understanding for a century, and even the existence of institutions to deal with this sort of thing for a century. But under hypercapitalism and neoliberalism and U.S. fascism, that ability is not allowed. We are not allowed to exert that basic self-protection because we defer to the interests of private wealth, even to the point of killing millions. The airlines in January of 2020, the airlines could have just been shut down, right? And countries that had nationalized airlines did do that. But the fascist West was able to prevail upon these specific industries in their countries to see that that didn't happen. Private wealth was protected at the expense of millions of lives, and we were able to use that influence to force many of those countries that would have otherwise kept those lockdowns until this thing was gone, that particular lockdown in this case, to not do that. Um, so capital is constantly pressuring across every sector and in various insidious ways um, uh, to again sacrifice the life of the masses so that a very, very small number of mega millionaires and billionaires and a few of functionaries that operate in their on their behalf will benefit and others will die. Um, uh, uh, one idea that is described by limited hangout folks is accelerationism, or capitalist accelerationism, it should be called. And um, this is people who want to lean into and speed up and expand the imperialist tendencies of capital, um, so furthering global inequalities, further exploiting resources. This example of the artificial intelligence sector becoming much, much larger and vaster and also vastly more damaging in its environmental impact as a result is not just an example, but perhaps the best example of this capitalist accelerationism in our time. Emancipatory approach, like that of the United Earth Directorate, must confront these hyper-capitalistic sectors and dismantle not just those sectors, but the structures of domination behind them, such as the U.S. military-industrial complex. It's why I'm running for president of the United States, but I make only one campaign promise, which is this. On day one, I will sign an executive order, which I have written, which will disband the United States federal government, placing it under the control of the now semi-autonomous autonomous native nations, which will then become fully autonomous and further endowed so that they will be able to do the good and necessary work of maintaining these former federal properties. And the United States' 50 states and additional territories will remain in their present form, for most purposes, but they will be administered by by the stewardship and oversight of these Native American political bodies. The most important aspect of this, perhaps, aside from the necessity and righteousness of the land back causes and projects, but the most essential thing here is that the United States military-industrial complex, this trillion-dollar a monstrosity that is the world's worst polluter, will no longer exist. And so this geopolitical hell that we are all forced into by its existence, U.S. military fascism, will cease to be, and that will allow the world to begin to heal and will allow us to begin to do things like build new institutions like the proposed United Earth Directorate. There's a certain kind of perverse technological determinism in the writings of these capitalist accelerationists, but we have to return to the better technological determinism of Marx if we are to really benefit from artificial general intelligence and human hybrid superintelligence. I will refer now a little bit to a work by Nick Bostrom called Superintelligence, which is at once a tremendous feat and also a really bad piece of writing. because, like the writings in capitalist accelerationism, it's almost all filtered through this perversion that is the interests of capitalist ruling elites. But it does nevertheless examine the prospects of artificial general intelligence and ultimate superintelligence in ways that had not really been examined. And it's a big book. It's worth reading. You can also have a conversation with that book in the way that I suggested by uploading it to something like myreader.ai and then just asking a bunch of questions. You don't have to read anything. You can just ask it questions um, um, and have a kind of conversation there. You can create a Marxist critique like this of it using tools like that. It's a pretty incredible thing to be able to do, I think. Um, so our Marxist critique here asserts that technology's development is shaped by material conditions and must be shaped to a far higher degree by the necessaries of an honest class struggle on behalf of the masses. And we must challenge the idea that technology alone brings about any change. It's at best the kinds of things that comrades Lenin and Stalin described, where the trap of social democracy, where one step forward might be taken, but two steps back are then taken. So if you're always taking one step forward and two steps back, you're not making net progress. This is no better in evidence than in the neoliberal era, where the United States life expectancy has fallen off a cliff, where 1 million people now are living on the street, freezing their butts off. So let's then do our best to think of a world that's guided by a Marxist, a communistic accelerationism, where we can take these insights into advanced computing and technology generally, but advocate for the truly democratic control of the people's government and collective ownership, and necessary in both of those is the fight against and abolition of private wealth. By socializing technological progress, we can ensure that the benefits of automation and AI are shared by all rather than concentrated in the hands of a few capitalists. If you talk to technologists or transhumanists or effective altruists or all of these kinds of people, they will try to draw you into a conversation where they lie to you and tell you that that artificial general intelligence under capitalism will lead to that kind of outcome. But any analysis of history at all can pretty quickly debunk that, because AI might be involve the automation of advanced computing to a high degree, but any other number of other sectors have already been highly automated across the course of the 20th century. That automation did not benefit all, as they suggest AI will. It benefited virtually none of the workers working in those sectors. Instead, a professional managerial class emerged that was able to siphon off those resources, building out a billionaire class that hadn't existed prior to that time, and a lovely added benefit being that these people have killed the planet. Very close to doing so at this time. This more communistic acceleration will have to harness technology to overcome these forces of alienation, to create a society where individuals have greater control over their lives and work. By reducing the necessity of labor through automation, we, under a people's government that is run by AI, we can open avenues for more meaningful and fulfilling activities, as we mentioned, no longer seeing the many billions of people not meeting their desired and rightful potential as potential Einsteins, so to speak. Um, in pursuing this more communist compatible technocracy, highly integrated communist technocracy, let's look at the ideas of the United Earth Directorate, where we describe a AI driven system of governance that I've referred to as techno-communism. This suggests the possibility of a new social order, and there's many models on which people's government run by AI could or will unfold. But I have suggested that one such advanced computing paradigm would be the use of a technology that's already been developed quite well, the use of an AI sidekick, a digital twin that's able to perhaps mirror your personality to a high degree, but more importantly, is able to operate in your stead for a large amount of time. And this virtual model is able to interact with other virtual models and interact with the centralized United Earth Directorate. So it's able to aid in the monitoring and optimizing of necessary infrastructure, um, um, uh, agricultural and food supply chain systems, healthcare systems like a public health service, more fully realized than any that currently exists. Even in socialist countries, I would like to see a public health service that's able to treat aging as a disease. I believe that the state of emerging biomedicine is such that this is a realistic prospect, but again, under capitalism, will not be a thing for you. It will be a thing for mega millionaires and billionaires and perhaps a handful of their functionaries. But it will be what will be for you is more of the same for-profit death care that kills 100,000 people a year in this country. So these AI sidekicks, these digital twins, would enable complex analysis and simulation, allowing for dynamic policy making focused on human well-being over profit. At the center of the proposed United Earth Directorate is something that we could call a collective intelligence unit, which combines human and artificial intelligence in a more distilled form in just in the way that the Politburo operated in service to the larger CPSU. Um, this would have some oversight over this larger digital network. I think this integration echoes Posadis's concept again of alien contact because this superintelligence is a profoundly different thing, a kind of mind and kind of system than has previously existed. And this is all something that could be built out based on technology that currently exists in high-end computer science laboratories and is simply not being rolled out at this time. It all could exist based on the basis of, say, something like Llama 4. Llama 3 may be close to artificial general intelligence. Llama 4, something that you can download, will also be able to download for free, could become a basis of ad hoc networks that could be used to build something like this. All of this is a profound shift in technological capability, which is not meaningful. Technology means nothing if it's not used to benefit humanity. So this has to change also our social relations as well, which is why I suggest that you not merely keep an open mind to something like this network of AI sidekicks operating on your behalf, creating a kind of a proxy hive mind. You shouldn't be upset by this, because desperate times call for desperate measures. We are facing capitalism's climate apocalypse, and we have to be willing to build things that are unique and powerful in defiance of the forces that are marching us on this death march. Capitalism is not capable of doing any of this, and the capitalists lie that technology, again, itself can drive progress or can cause these changes. Absent the massive structural reforms required, is something that you must resist at every turn. We have to. We have no time to lose. Capitalist accelerationism only has worsened inequality and the problems of global warming, all for the sake of private wealth, for growing and consolidating private fortunes, and the concentration of wealth is more important than life itself, even to the people who benefit from it. These people are now building bunkers. Zuckerberg, many others built underground bunkers because it's becoming apparent that this problem is real, and they hope that they can hide underground while billions perish. That probably will not work, but we must recognize the situation that we're in and take all of the actions, resist the variety of liberal forces like the ones I talked about at the top of the show in my life, and all the ones that prevail upon us in this hell of capitalist reality generally. We must resist them and fight to build this livable world before the climate tipping points are crossed. I think the true philosophical accelerationism, the communistic accelerationism, can be used to build something like the United Earth Directorate, and so techno-communism can employ automation and AI for the emancipation of all human beings, dramatically reducing labor necessaries, as you can imagine in that world where the AI sidekick is doing the labor, and where the institutions are not designed such that they siphon off your surplus value of your labor by the managerial class into the hands of billionaires and mega millionaires. But this requires that we make this demand that the collective ownership of advanced computing and technology, and the collective ownership of all things then being in the public good, and all things then oriented towards satisfying basic needs, rather than, again, accumulating private profit. The challenges that we face in our time are truly monumental, but the potential for transformative change is within our grasp, and so benefits almost equal to the risks, or perhaps far beyond in certain respect. So let us unite under the let us unite under the banner of the United Earth Directorate, and drawing inspiration from the visionary works of Lenin and Stalin, and from the unique vision of J. Posadas, and so many others. Together we can overcome the challenges that lie ahead, ensuring the survival and prosperity of future generations whose very existence now hangs in the balance, and establishing a future guided not by the lies of capitalist accelerationism or of empire generally, but by the principles put forth in what I've described as techno-communism. Thank you for your time.